Yes, ma'am, ready to go.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the second day of our faculty development program on research methodology, reigniting that research spark. I assume more people will join in, but we're going to begin now since it's almost 3:05. It is a genuine pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague, Dr. Anuradha J. Bakshi, head of the department and associate professor at College of Home Science, Nirmala Niketan, affiliated to Mumbai University. Dr. Bakshi has topped the university across specializations in both BSc and MSc Home Science at the MS University of Baroda. She was awarded the Srimati Gauri Kaveri Nayak Gold Medal and the Dr. Pramila Pathak Award for Outstanding Research and Coursework. She's completed her PhD from the Department of Child and Family Studies, University of Tennessee at Knoxville, USA, and obtained the Outstanding Research Award for her doctoral research. The years she spent in USA added to her deep appreciation of individual and cultural diversity. She began her teaching career in 1986 at MS University Baroda. She taught undergraduate students and coordinated a National Institute of Mental Health funded research laboratory as a PhD scholar in USA as well. In Mumbai, before joining the Home Science College, she was teaching at the College of Social Work, Nirmala Niketan, whilst also holding the post of Associate Research Director. I can vouch for this. She enjoys engaging conversations both within and outside the classroom. She also loves putting her words in written form and has published and co-edited books, several chapters in books and papers in journals. She's a member and chairperson of various boards of studies and is one of the two chief editors of the Routledge, Taylor and Francis Scopus listed journal, British Journal of Guidance and Counseling. She's been teaching research methods and statistics from the late 1980s. As in USA, her graduate committee chair had requested her to coach other doctoral students in statistics and also SPSS. She has been teaching research methods and stats at Nirmala Niketan Home Science from 1996 and has taught it to advanced students at social work and at the TISS as well at Mumbai. Anuradha, we are truly grateful that you have found the time in your really busy schedule to engage in this FDP with our large group of eager participants. Not all of them are there yet, and you can't always see them, but they can see you. And a little bit of old school advice for this huge class out there in this digital age. It would still be good to keep some paper and a pen handy, note down ideas that can spark off newer projects and give a different perspective to an ongoing one, thus bringing life to this vision of the FDP. Dr. Bakshi's repertoire of experience offers us the best of multiple worlds, from training in the US to working in India, editing a British journal. We look forward to your input and your insight on both quantitative as well as qualitative research methodology. It's going to be an informing, enlightening, and very interesting session. We will be taking a break in between for some question and answers on the first part. I am thinking quantitative might take a little more time than qualitative, but we are flexible there. The only major request is that from now on, please keep the chat box for questions that will be collated. And if possible, we'll try and have two Q&A sessions, one somewhere in the middle and one towards the end. So all the very best to all of us. And Anuradha, the screen is all yours.
Thank you so much, Ruby. It's most heartwarming, the words that you have expressed for me. And thank you for this honor of leading a session in the Xavier's FDP. I hope the participants are eager to engage with me and are looking forward to this session. I will be using a PowerPoint, but I haven't put everything on the PowerPoint. I'll be talking, and I will be sometimes turning the PowerPoint off so that I can be visible and to the audience. I will share screen now. Where is this? Okay, so I have titled my presentation, Knock Knock. Who's there? Quantitative? Qualitative? Qualitative? What could that be? So, children are so curious. They have so many questions. Why, what, how come? I read once that a child squeezed toothpaste all over the house just to see what was the length of the toothpaste that would come out of a tube. Only a child can have such investigativeness. And when we want to, as adults, keep that alive in us, we become researchers. So I'm calling out to your playful spirit, and I'm inviting not just the adult in you who wants to have status as a researcher, but I'm also inviting the playful child in you to travel with me today. So, if you're going to be engaged in this session, first question is, why conduct research at all? So there are some lofty some things, like I just said, it could be to keep the child in you alive. You want to be playful. You want to remain curious. You want to answer questions. And there are some loftier ambitions. Some of the loftier ambitions include that you want to be a knowledge contributor and not just a knowledge consumer. And perhaps, in a small way, at least, you want to change the world. Perhaps you want to change the understanding of some phenomena through your research work. Perhaps your research has great application for change in policy. Perhaps your research can help improve practice in the field that you are in. For example, for me, that would be education, counseling, psychotherapy. It could be marketing for you. So perhaps you want to improve practice. So as we proceed with this session today, reflect on your childlike reasons and also loftier reasons for wanting to engage with research. Now, and I just want to be really frank here. I've not been able to prettify the PowerPoint, neither have I been able to put animation, which I dearly love, because I really have been juggling multiple tasks and have been hard pressed for time. In fact, time management is one of the qualitative studies that I'm going to illustrate at a later point in the session, is including participants who have talked about time management as well, issues of time. Anyway, coming back here, this is a very important slide because this is the framework of my session today. And I have I want you to get this really well. So a paradigm, as you know, is a model, and a model is always simpler than the reality and the vastness of the universe out there. The word paradigm was popularized by Thomas Kuhn, one of the most famous scientific historians and philosophers of science that the Western world has known. So research paradigms can be divided into two very broad categories, quantitative and qualitative. Whatever is on this slide is from my expertise. So here, the first thing that distinguishes a research paradigm, whether it is quantitative or qualitative, is the worldview or the ideological stance of the researcher. At a very basic level, this means whether it is quantitative or qualitative, positivist, post-positivist, modernist, post-modernist, pre-modernist, we don't even want to consider it, it's too outdated. Then there's a worldview which is discipline specific. And of course, because disciplines and the knowledge within a discipline has transformation across time, has advancements, that discipline specific worldview is temporally located. That means it's located in a particular time in that field of study. And it is within a discipline, there can be particular camps with some people having a certain preference in what they examine, how they examine the phenomena. Culture does play a role, and personal factors also do play a role. All of these come in what will inform the worldview or the ideological stance of the researcher. The next is the role or position of the researcher and the roles or position that are made available to participants. And here I'm talking about human participants, although a case in a research need not have anything to do with human participants, but social sciences, largely possibility is very high that the participant is a human being. I must tell you an anecdote here. So for donkey's years, or for decades rather, I was teaching research methods also to nutrition students and textile students. So I've been, I would have a case as a potato or a fish or a garment, but here we are social scientists, so participant is likely to be a human being, although in marketing research, the product itself can be a case. Now, extent of pre-structuring. So to what extent is the whole research process from the first step to the last step, to what extent it is pre-structured versus open and evolving? That is very important. The types of research aim will differ depending on a quantitative or qualitative paradigm. The types of data collected. Quantitative researchers, as you very well know, are number crunchers, and words and the depth that words can represent is the qualitative data. How the data is collected will also is also another feature that differentiates the quantitative and qualitative paradigm. How the data is analyzed, the conclusions, how are they drawn? Are they drawn using numbers? Are they drawn using narrative themes? And the dissemination, is it only through esoteric papers in specialized journals, or are there other ways of dissemination which reach out to a non-initiated group that is, for example, the general public? Definitely, we are seeing a shift here, because although esoteric research, as Thomas Kuhn informs us, is critical for the growth of science, and I'm using science as a broad term because all investigators are scientists, because they are exploring phenomena and examining phenomena, whether that phenomena has to do with concrete objects like rocks, or whether it has to do with abstract concepts like notions of justice. Okay, but one of the shifts that we are seeing across paradigms is that although esoteric research is critically important for advancement in a field, so that we don't start from scratch every time we are doing research, we build on what is already in the field. So esoteric research is very important, but there is a growing recognition that we cannot leave the general public out, and that the dissemination has to translate into ideas that can reach the common person and be applied in everyday life, not just through changes of policy, which I was just looking at someone's work yesterday. Apparently, even in medical research, change in policy is very slow. Okay, going ahead. So now I'm going to focus on quantitative research. And the first question we have here is, some quantitative researchers do believe that, oh no, I am a neutral person. I am objective. I don't operate using a worldview, but I must inform you all, and that is A capital, L capital, L capital, all human beings including scientists and researchers, because scientists and researchers haven't dropped down from another planet. They are human beings as well. So they have beliefs and convictions that form their worldview. And these beliefs and convictions, in fact, are, I would say, very strong. Scientists and researchers tend to be very opinionated. I have yet to meet a researcher who is not opinionated. Okay, let's have a look. You might recognize the Lost World book, the Jurassic Park series. And you have here Michael Crichton, who unfortunately is no longer alive. But in the book, The Lost World, I came across his statement that he has made in the book, that human beings, this is paraphrased because I didn't have access to the book right now, but human beings, Michael Crichton says, are the only species in the world who kill for their beliefs. Other species on the planet kill for reasons which are to do with food chain, and a tigress could kill because she wants to protect the cubs, or at least misinterpret threat. And in misinterpretation of threat, animal can kill. So, it's only human beings who kill for their beliefs. Beliefs make up a lot of the human being. Let's look at by Werner Heisenberg here. German physicist and Nobel laureate. In 1958, he shook up quantum physics when he stated, what we observe is not nature itself, but nature exposed to our method of questioning. And that comes from the stance of the researcher. So here we have Thomas Kuhn, whom I have already mentioned twice. And this book here, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, is considered to be the most cited scientific textbook. All right. Now, what did he say? And this is in the beginning of his book. Kuhn said that the particular conclusions a researcher arrives at are probably determined by his prior. Now, this is 1970, so I'm going to do some gender policing of his language, so I'll change it, are probably determined by his or her prior experience in other fields, by the accidents of his or her investigation, and by his or her own individual makeup. These are often essential determinants of scientific development. All right, so I hope I have convinced you that you have strong convictions. And as a quantitative researcher, the quantitative researcher has a high likelihood of having a positivist, modernist, worldview, and may argue ad infinitum about truth being objective, that values being neutral, and a far reduced orientation now, but one that was existing for a while, a reductionist and mechanistic view in which you have reducibility as a key component. I'll give you an example. So if you're studying the reductionist perspective in the study of parenting and children. So parents separate, child separate, one way a theorization or conceptualization of a one-way influence from the parent to the child only being a recipient of this influence. That is when research is framed like that, and lots of research has been framed like that, that is a reductionist mechanistic view. Majority picture, well, all as I will be noting in my presentation, there is no quantitative research without the use of statistics, and statistics is to do with the majority picture. You take the correlation coefficient. The coefficient is a result of the maximum number of pairs that are co-varying in the same direction. Whatever every single statistical method is focusing on a majority picture. Nomothetic, all right, is the other orientation of the quantitative researcher, extraction of general laws, wanting an excessively high generalizability. And there's a high possibility that the worldview includes deductive reasoning in the quantitative paradigm. So you go from the general to the specific. I've already spoken of a discipline-specific worldview. The discipline-specific worldview is situated in time and therefore is temporal, T-E-M-P-O-R-A-L, and is it's not always as unanimous view as Kuhn would like us to believe. There are camps within a discipline and preferences, but there is some level of consensus within the discipline that any researcher operates from. This researcher sitting in an ivory tower by herself is a wrong notion. Researchers work in teams, and there is some level of consensus within a subfield in the discipline at a particular time that informs a research inquiry. Cultural and personal worldviews do impact research and theory. If they did not, we should not have multiple theories about anything. And every single phenomenon and every single field has multiple theories and contemporaneously multiple theories. It's not even that the theory is dominating for a while and then is replaced. It's not necessarily only a successive line. And how can we have multiple theories contemporaneously of the same phenomena? Only because cultural and personal worldviews life experiences do have a role to play even in quantitative research, because they have a role to play in all research. Let's go next to the role or position of the quantitative researcher and that of the participants. In the quantitative paradigm, the researcher is clearly the expert. If the researcher is humble, then the researcher orients himself or herself as one of a team of experts. And who is this participant? The participant is the recipient who must comply by faithfully and thoroughly answering questions, which is generally tick, tick, tick on various checklists or multiple responses in questionnaires. So there we have, let's go ahead. Now, extent of pre-structuring in quantitative research. Now, if I were having a live on offline session, I would have asked some questions and got you to respond, but I'm not able to do that. So please excuse the one-way delivery here. So extent of pre-structuring in the research process in quantitative research is high to very high. Occasionally, it is moderately high. So, and it has to do with these aspects. To what extent is extant, that means existing theory used, what is the aim, how is the aim framed, what are the data collection instruments, what are the analytical tools, and how are the findings expressed. We'll have a look at this now. So like I have told you, the pre-structuring is very high in quantitative research. So if we are looking at particularly the use of existing theory, a high quality quantitative research is formulated using a theoretical framework. If you are a quantitative researcher and you have not formulated your research using a theoretical framework, you are like, oh, you have reached the mediocre category, unfortunately. All right. Now, suppose if the research has not emerged from a theoretical framework, okay, it is expected that the researcher will clarify in the research his or her theoretical orientation explain linkages to at least one, if not multiple theories in the introduction as well as in the discussion. So the pre-structuring is that the theory must come first and lead. The research must evolve from theory. If you fail to do that, kindly, once you've thought of your research, link it up with theories before you publish your paper. Now, in we have hypotheses. All right. Here, of course, I have two examples of directional hypotheses. And a hypothesis is, of course, a tentative, testable prediction of the outcome of the research. And hypothesis has a very high value in quantitative research. It's and I personally love using hypotheses as well, because wow, I mean, it really makes you feel like the scientist. You are making a testable statement, and then you're going to conduct your research to find support for this. Not find support, oh, hopefully not. Okay. So here there are two examples I've given. Adolescent boys are more physically aggressive than adolescent girls. It's a directional hypothesis, which we call one-tailed, and adolescent girls are more relationally aggressive than adolescent boys. Relational aggression, in case anyone is curious, is where if there's ABC and A tells B something nasty about C, which impacts B's relationship with C. That means A has ended up damaging the relationship between B and C by maligning C in talking with B. So, apparently in the research conducted in USA, relational aggression is found to be very, very high amongst girls, whereas boys are very high in physical aggression. And if we look at populations of incarceration, that means in prison populations, definitely in US data that I have looked at, and presumably the same is the case here, the prison populations are very much male rather than female. And that, however, in the literature, we have this more subversive kind of aggression that women may have or girls may have, which is relational aggression. Here I found this nice cartoon here, which is like, you look, half the work is done. All you need to do is fill in the top part so we can legally say the bottom part. So the conclusion is eating chocolate will make you look younger and thinner. Now, of course, by the way, because this is an R&D department of a chocolate company, there is conflict of interests here. But otherwise, our research hypotheses are like that. A research hypothesis, you already have the conclusion. Now your data better fit that. And, it's a time for celebration when the data does fit the hypothesis. Okay, let's continue. Now, extent of pre-structuring with regard to data collection instruments. So in quantitative research, we have a plethora of close-ended instruments. So you have checklists, you have rating scales, you have questionnaires with response options that need to be selected. There are researchers, quantitative researchers, who have the code book ready before data collection has started, because all of their data is being collected through close-ended responses. So that their code books are ready, their file, their data file with their variable names and everything is ready. Now just the data has to be collected, and people have to tick in the right box or circle the right answer for them, etc. I have here by the way, this is an excellent internet addiction scale, which continues to be used today, which was developed by Kimberly Young way back in 1998, but it is of continuing relevance, and it is an example of the pre-structured data collection instruments and pre-structured data collection in quantitative research. All right, going ahead. Now, extent of pre-structuring, analytical tools. So statistics is the sine qua non of quantitative research. That means without statistics, there is no quantitative research. You know, when I have, you know, friends or some colleagues, they're like, oh, I don't want to do stats. But if you don't want to do stats, I mean, then quantitative research, it's like you're blindfolded and you're being led by someone, because 100% of the analytical tools in quantitative research are to do with statistics. So if there are any young scholars out there, or even mid-life scholars, or even scholars who may be in their late life, it's never too late to learn. You know, brain is plastic till the end of life, which is awesome. So you can help those have some adult plastic neurogenesis by getting hold of stats and mastering it. At least basic stats is quite easy to master. So of course, statistics is a pre-structured method, because you are applying the tool to your data, and you know, you can have, the data may not, suppose you're using a complex technique like path modeling, the data may not fit, well, too bad. You know, you may have multiple iterations of your path model, but if all paths are non-significant, then obviously too bad, you just have non-significant results. So statistics is pre-structured. Okay, then extent of pre-structuring in quantitative research with regard to the findings. Ready-made interpretations are there for the reader or the consumer. So I have one example here from, by the way, this Pettit, Gregory Pettit, was one of the chairs of my graduate committee when I was doing my PhD in USA. So I thought I must include some work of my teacher. So children were more likely to engage in peer-oriented play when this is young children, were more likely to engage in peer-oriented play when their own mothers were present, rather than if the mothers were absent. And here you have the t value. This was an independent t test. This is the observed t value of 2.23. The p value, which is the level of type 1 error, was less than 0.05. And there you have it. This is a typical, you know, finding, I mean, typical way in which a finding is expressed in quantitative research. I wish to reiterate that the interpretation is ready-made and is delivered to the reader or consumer. It does require you to know what is a p-value. It does require, okay, yeah, well, it may or may not require, because you can just disregard the numbers there and only read the text. But quantitative research of excellence would digest the text as well as the numbers and recognize the t-test of independent groups and the p-value here less than 5% chance of type 1 error. I also want to bring up one other feature here. You know, quantitative researchers can get on a high horse and think, oh, they're all very objective and so on. But please note, the whole foundation of advanced statistics rests on the legs of probability. Probability, by definition, is not equal to certainty. And I think that all quantitative researchers need to take stock of that. And the probability, I repeat, by definition, does not equal certainty. And all of quantitative research, I mean, all of advanced quantitative research rests on these not so steady legs of probability. Okay, less than 5% chance of type 1 error still means that, you could have been that one in that 5 out of 100 instead of the 95 out of 100. But human beings, they like to conduct their lives thinking that they have certainty. So high likelihood we equal as happening, and low likelihood we equate as not happening. So here, this is an acceptable level of significance, less than 0.05, which is for social sciences, the critical, you need to have less than 5%. Now, this is just a summary slide, so we can go ahead. So the pre-structuring in quantitative research across the steps of the research process is very high. Let's continue. Now I am going to look at types of quantitative research aims, and by no means is this list exhaustive, but it does cover very frequently used methods in quantitative research. Please note that all of these yield a numerical summary. Of course, graphs are important too in quantitative research, but new numbers are very important. Graphs are also important. Those graphs are anyways based on numbers. So all of these are captured using a quantitative lens that depends on numbers. So you can have descriptive research aims. You can have you have quantitative research, which is needed for scale or test construction or test standardization. Then you have quantitative research that is focused on data reduction or identification of dimensions. You have quantitative research that is focused on contrasting and comparing phenomena, males versus females, young versus old, so on and so forth. Then relationships, examining relationships between two variables, examining relationships between multiple phenomena, model testing, then model testing for relationships and other types of models, risk analysis models, which is not my area of expertise, but there is extensive quantitative research on risk analysis models. Marketing research has risk analysis, and environmental science has risk analysis. Although this is supposed to be for social sciences, I will be talking of sciences in general. Then you have quantitative research that focuses on causality, impact of, effect of, frequently through the use of experimental studies and planned interventions. You have quantitative research, which is evaluation based. So social work research has a lot of evaluation because these are social work programs and civil society initiatives that are being funded by various funders, and both the program developers, program implementers, as well as the funding agencies want to have a quantitative assessment of the efficacy of those field projects or field action programs. I'm now going to share some of these in further detail. Okay, so I hope you had a look here. Let's go to the descriptive aim, and I'm going to quickly provide an overview of some prerequisite concepts. So I'm sure that you are conversant, but just so that I'm certain that we are speaking the same language and we are operating with the same concepts. I'm just going to quickly summarize these. So population, as you know, is an exhaustive, that means comprehensive, all-inclusive set of elements or cases that are relevant for the study. Here itself, we have strange thing when we come to social sciences, because our populations are dynamic. Our populations, if we have research conducted on college students in, say, 2019, at least for 10 years, it is considered current. And, it will be one group of college students in possibly one university of one city of one academic term, never mind that in the 10 years since, that vast dynamic population may very well be different. But that's okay. We still would like to have gain knowledge through that study. So sample, of course, is a subset of the population, which act, and it is those cases that actually are comprising the participants, if they are human participants in the research, or if it is non-human participants. Suppose you are doing a research where you are your case equals a drug rehab program, then your case could be each drug rehab program. So sample is those cases that have made it into your research study, and they are the ones from whom or from what the information will be solicited. Okay, well, about whom or about what the information will be solicited, because you can have parents who are providing information on children, or teachers providing information on students, and so on. So it's not always the agent who provides information, but okay. A case is one element of the population, or one element of the sample. Sampling, by the way, is the process of selecting the subset from the population that will be the focus of your study, that from whom about whom the information will be sought. Sampling, there are two kinds of sampling techniques: probability sampling techniques and non-probability sampling techniques. In quantitative research, probability sampling techniques are preferred, but I will tell you that for decades, year after year, I've asked students to go to the best journals in the field and do a random check of research papers, whether they've used probability sampling or non-probability sampling, and year after year, the same outcome. Most research papers in quantitative, these are quantitative research papers, have used non-probability sampling techniques, although the preference is for probability sampling techniques. As you know, in probability sampling techniques, you have given so-called, this is theoretical, you have given an equal chance to every element in the population to be selected into your sample. This is a theoretical definition, because most of the time what it means is you've given an equal chance to every case in your sampling frame to be part of your research, not the population itself. But that's okay. Non-probability sampling, here you clearly are not giving every case an equal chance, every case in the population an equal chance to be in the sample. Non-probability sampling techniques, some of them are very justified and warranted in their use. So if you have an inaccessible population which is not readily locatable, you obviously have to use snowball sampling. But to use snowball sampling for things like parents are milling around. There are so many parents. Why do you need snowball sampling for parents? What is the shortage of parents? Who doesn't? In any building in Mumbai or anywhere else in the country, my gosh, there are parents and there are parents and there are parents. So there are reasons for the justified use of non-probability sampling techniques, such as cases are not visibly locatable, you need to use snowball sampling. If you have a clinical population that is unlikely to consent, then you definitely do have to use reliance on available subjects. You cannot say, I'm going to use simple random sampling. Chits, oh, patient number so-and-so, you are in my study. Aha. Drop your idea of your study then. So There are reasons for using non-probability sampling techniques, which are very valid and justified, warranted. But when they're used as a matter of convenience, that becomes a gray area. However, non-probability sampling techniques are faster to use, no doubt. They are time saving. So when there is shortage of time, researchers do depend on non-probability sampling techniques. And when we are working with human populations, we require cooperation and consent, and that also explains why non-probability sampling techniques are featuring higher in published literature than probability sampling techniques. Large funded projects, which are very large, occasionally you'll come across a probability sampling, like simple random sampling or stratified sampling. Variable, first and foremost, is a characteristic of the case. Further, it's a characteristic of the case that varies across the cases, across the members or across the elements in the sample. So if you have 50, suppose you have 68 girls, school-going girls in your sample. Obviously, and these girls, some of them are in, SSC board, some of them are in CBSE, some are in ICSE. Now, school board is a variable because there is variation from one case to another. So it's a variable, but gender is not a variable. It is a characteristic of the case, but it is the same value for that variable across the cases in the sample. Therefore, it is a constant. So very important point, which sometimes I find escapes a person's attention. A variable is a characteristic of the case. Each variable is one characteristic of the case. And the reason for variable is because the value of that variable changes from one participant to another participant if we are talking of human participants. And for a constant, that characteristic of the case is the value remains the same across all participants. Again, if your research has to do with human participants. Levels of measurement are very important because you have to select the statistical method based on the level of measurement. And without an understanding of the levels of measurement, you're really flummoxed, you're really dead-ended. So there are 4 levels of measurement, and you have on the 2 extremes are nominal and ratio. Nominal, is a word which is the root word is norm in Latin, which means name, Namen in German, Nam in Hindi, Namaha in, I think it is in Sanskrit, so on and so forth. It is a word that is nominal, means in name only. So here you have values of a variable that have no quantitative aspect to it. They vary in name only. So if I'm talking of the religious affiliation of a participant, whether the religious affiliation is Hindu or Muslim or Christian or Parsi, no case has more of a religion or less of a religion. All of them, religious affiliation is a qualitative characteristic which has no quantitative element. So, or for example, blood group. Whether you are A positive, B positive, AB positive, O positive, A minus, A negative, whatever, you don't have more of a blood group or less of a blood group. It is a qualitative characteristic without any quantitative element in it at all. On the 4th level, which is where values of the variable represent cardinal numbers. So that means the variable is represented in values that are counts. This is the only place in statistics where numbers are actually numbers. So if if number of siblings is the variable, well, for I have one sibling. I know that my friend Ruby also has one sibling. That one is a count. All right. So I have another participant could have 3 siblings, 0 siblings, 2 siblings. These are all counts. You also have variables on the ratio level, cardinal numbers such as your age in years, weight in kilograms. In the middle, you have ordinal and interval. Ordinal are where the values of the variable represent crude or elementary rankings. This is the beginning notion of more or less. So you can rank order the values of an ordinal variable. The values represent ordinal numbers, but these are rough ordinal numbers. They are crude ordinal numbers. We cannot talk about whether the numbers are equispaced or not. Whereas the interval level, which has, for example, Celsius on it, pH, and all psychological assessment, unless it is a frequency measurement. Almost all, I mean, IQ, for example, self-esteem, all of these are on the interval level where you have sophisticated ordinal numbers which are claimed to be equispaced. So you have temperature on the Celsius or Fahrenheit scale, the markings on the theoretical scale of temperature, the markings are equispaced. All right. With regard to descriptive research, we normally use objectives and research questions. We don't use hypotheses, okay? Always remember that hypotheses are for advanced statistics, research objectives and research questions. So to describe the profile of college-going youth in Mumbai, so that's an objective. And if I turn it into a question, what is the profile of college-going youth in Mumbai? Let's continue. So for descriptive nominal level variables, we have, for numerical summary, you have raw frequencies, relative frequencies, and percentages. Raw frequency is just an unprocessed frequency. You are just going to count up the number of cases. Suppose you are counting up for religious affiliation. So how many Hindus you have in your sample, how many Muslims, how many Christians, how many Parsis. Relative frequency relative to the total. So if you have, say, 10 Hindus out of 40 is your sample size, then your relative frequency is 10 divided by 40, which is 0.25. But human beings don't do well with, they don't want to see these numbers which are below 1, which are fractions. So we multiply relative frequencies by a constant of 100 to get percentages. So here we have raw frequency, relative frequency, and percentage. So no processing of a raw frequency, number of occurrences of that value in the data set. And relative frequency is the frequency of occurrence of a value relative to the total. Numerator is the raw frequency, denominator is n. And relative frequency multiplied by constant of 100 gives us percentage, which human beings are happy to encounter. So you have, other things in quantitative research, all relative frequencies obviously add up to a total of 1. And relative frequency multiplied by anything gives you parts of that total. So if you want pieces of a pie graph, you have to multiply the relative frequency by the total area, which is 360. And you get pieces of a pie. Going ahead. So nominal level variables, we have raw frequencies, relative frequencies, and percentages. All right. Ratio level variable, you can compute frequencies, relative frequencies, and percentages for ratio level variables, but they will not likely be in the research report. We normally compute measures of the center Mean being the most used, median for when there are outliers in the data set, the mean becomes unrepresentative, so we have the median. Mode, which is the most recurrent value, is the least used as far as research reports go. Mean is the arithmetic mean, of course. It is the arithmetic average. You add up all the values, divide by the number of values. Median, as you know, is the 50th percentile. It's the midpoint of an ordered data set. It's that point of division of an ordered data set such that 50% of the values are at or smaller and 50% of the values are at or larger. Min max, very important for ratio level data. It's the minimum obtained value and the maximum obtained value. Then you have variance, which is nothing but mean squares. This is all lovely vocabulary. So mean squares, I love it, and the numerator of the variance, sum of squares, which are in international stats community, it's just called squares. I had wonderful stats taught by the stats department in my master's in Baroda, and then I insisted on doing the most complex stats offered to a PhD student at the University of Tennessee at Knoxville, because I found that otherwise I would be repeating what I'd already studied in Baroda. So I must share this anecdote too. So I found out that the life sciences PhD and the IO Psych, industrial and organizational psychology, and the management PhDs had the best PhD courses for a doctoral candidate. So off I went to the stats department of the university, and I went to ask to be enrolled in the course, because as I was from the college at that time, my college was known as Human Ecology, College of Human Ecology, gentrified name for home science. So I went there and I stood at the door of this professor, and I asked to be let into the course because I did not have an automatic entry into the course. So he says, sorry, the course is full. It's not meant for your PhD. So it's meant for life sciences and management PhDs and IO Psych and logistics and all that. So I said, yes, but I have come halfway across the world to learn, and I wish to be in this this statistics program. This is the course that I wish to take it. And it was a 4-semester course. So you did part 1, part 2 of, and then there was a multivariate statistics, part 1, part 2 in the following year. So, I stood there, we had a gazing match. I stood there, he was seated at his desk. I continued to gaze at him. After a while, he said, okay, next year, I will guarantee that you're in. And of course, I was there for the long haul. So I was like, okay. And next year, the professor changed. And it was some Mexican origin statistician who was going to teach the course. And I was like, oh. So I dashed over to the stats building again. But that kindly professor, and I must say, this is remarkable. It was not an unusual experience. I had very wonderful experiences while I was a student in UTK. So the professor had informed that an Iranian student will come and ask to be let in. I was like, Iranian? But I think the confusion was Bakshi is a Persian name. The word Baksh is there in Arabic and Persian. So I had never told him that I was Iranian, and I was like, I'm not Iranian, I'm Indian. Okay, and one more anecdote. So what I loved, not only did I get into the course and did all 4 semesters of this course, along with wonderful friends that I made who were doing their PhD in logistics and city planning and management and IO Psych and life sciences. So a different crowd to hang out with. The other thing was that the primary text, the first author was an Indian. I was so proud. Bhattacharya and Johnson most expensive textbook was our primary textbook. And the first author was Indian. I was like, oh, this is it. This is it. You know, to this day, I recommend Bhattacharya and Johnson. Okay, anyway, you have here variance. So from my days in USA, so you have mean squares is variance, which is sum of squares is numerator. And let's have a look here just for fun and revision. I have scrolled here. So you have age of children, a very simple exercise that I've concocted. So you have xi, that is the variable x with the individual values of the variable, or also the index of summation, because you have the summation xi. You have the difference, the deviation of each value from the mean, and obviously the sum of deviations is 0 because the mean is the center, is the arithmetic center of a distribution. And we square, here come the squares, that is the numerator of a variance. Here are the squares. Each of these is a square. We are summing up the individual deviation from the mean, and here is the sum of squares. The mean, as you know, is nothing but summation xi upon n. The variance is the sum of squares divided by n minus 1, which can be called degrees of freedom. It is also the number of independent, because summation xi minus x bar equals 0, any one value is dependent on the rest of the values because the summation is 0. So you have n minus 1 as the denominator. You have mean squares where the unit of measurement becomes a square. Standard deviation is for us to get back to the original. Oh my gosh, did I not? Okay, I forgot to write here, but it's here, 2.12. The unit of measurement becomes squared when we are computing a variance. So the standard deviation, which is the square root of the variance, brings us back to the unit of measurement that we started out with. Please note there's a 2.12 here. And this is the summary statement that we have for descriptive statistics with ratio level data. So age of children range from 5 to 10 years with a mean of 7 years and a standard deviation of plus minus 2.12 years. This squares and mean squares, mean squares are very important for other advanced statistics as well. Currently, of course, this is descriptive statistics that we are looking at. Median is a locational average, which is unaffected by the extremes. It doesn't matter what is on either end. It is best computed either using 1 or 2 values. And therefore, when we have, in Mumbai, for example, if you are describing the household income of families, you cannot use the mean because we have some of the richest families in the world residing in Mumbai. So we have to use the median household income because it doesn't matter what outliers there are. It doesn't matter that we have the 8th or 9th or 10th richest person, richest individual, or richest families in the city. In Mumbai, it doesn't matter. And unfortunately, on the lower end, with regard to household income, it's not an outlier because we continue to have gross inequities in income distribution and wealth distribution in our country, as also across most of the world. So this is, by the way, the mean, variance, standard deviation, min, max are the foundation of even advanced statistics. Okay, let's see here. So we saw nominal level and ratio level. I've added here on this slide ordinal level variables. So ordinal level variables, you have a choice. By and large, we use raw frequencies and percentages, but sometimes you can report a mean or a median or a mode which will have to be decoded. So if you have agreement ratings and your mean was, you've used a single item Likert rating ranging from 1 to 5, 1 not at all agree and 5 completely agree. And suppose you have a value of 3.5 that will need to be decoded, and it will be 4, and therefore 4 may be agreed. So ordinal level variables, where the values of the variable are crude ordinal numbers. Most of the time we use raw frequencies and percentages, but you can use either a mean or a median or a mode, which will have to be decoded. Lastly, interval level variables are analyzed for descriptive purposes in identical fashion with ratio level variables. However, instead of a single min-max, here you have 2 separate min-maxes, the theoretical range, which is the minimum possible value and the maximum possible value, and the actual range, which is the minimum obtained value and the maximum obtained value. So for example, and you can also, I've not put it, but I please include, you also have the theoretical midpoint. So you can compute the theoretical midpoint, and you have so interval level and ratio level both are quantitative, clearly quantitative data, and are similarly described statistically. However, you have theoretical midpoint, theoretical range, and actual range. Actual range is same as min-max here. So you have theoretical midpoint and theoretical range, which is part of the descriptive aim of when you have interval level variables. Suppose you have self-esteem, you have socioeconomic status scales, which are continuous and they are at the interval level. I had used a scale like that for my doctoral work. I hope everyone understands theoretical range. So if you have a self-esteem scale range, which is a 10-item scale, each item measured from 1 to 5, the minimum possible score for the scale is obviously 10, because the minimum value for each item is 1. And the maximum possible score is 50, because the maximum score on each item is 5, and there are 10 such items. Actual range will depend on your data that is collected. Okay, now here we move on to advanced statistics. And here there is a joke which I have already alluded to earlier. And so in this joke, do you know the latest statistics joke? And the girl says, probably. So indeed, probability. Okay, thank you, Ruby, for letting me know about time. I am wondering about time myself, so thank you. Okay, so probably, yes, this is a punning, all right, because probability, as I told you, which has to do with uncertainty, and chance are the legs of advanced statistics. So let's go ahead. Some quick prerequisite concepts. Probability is a quantitative estimation of how likely it is that an uncertain event will occur. So there are multiple parts to the definition of probability. First of all, it's a quantitative estimate. And of what? Of how likely it is that an uncertain event will occur. So we do not compute probability for events that are 100% not likely to occur or 100% likely to occur. Probability is generally expressed as a relative frequency between 0 and 1, but I remind you, human beings don't like relative frequencies, so we multiply it by 100, and therefore we talk of probability 65% likelihood and 80% likelihood and all that. Probability with regard to type 1 and type 2 errors is very salient, especially type 1 error, that is requiring us to have a look at these types of hypotheses. So the researcher's hypothesis is a claim that the researcher makes. So the claim that the researchers make, that the researcher makes in statistics is called an alternative hypothesis. And the negation of that claim is the null hypothesis. The null hypothesis is the representing what is without the claim being made by the researcher. If we look at medical research and the history of research and medical research, so if someone is claiming that their drug reduces total cholesterol, the drug A reduces total cholesterol. In that case, that is a claim that the researcher is making. It is an alternative hypothesis. But the current status is the negation of the claim, and statistical methods are set up such that we test against the null, and we either fail to reject the null or we reject the null. Null meaning null hypothesis. So the null hypothesis is the negation of the researcher's claim. We have type 1 and type 2 errors, which are very critical for quantitative research. And, false positives and false negatives can be used as an analogy. Type 1 error, when it occurs, is a false positive, and type 2 error is a false negative. So if the researcher's claim is actually not true in the population, but the sample data appear to lead to the conclusion that the researcher's claim is correct, we have a type 1 error that has occurred. Type 2 error is where the researcher's claim was actually quite accurate in the true population, but so sorry, the sample data do not provide clear evidence of that, and therefore we have to reject the, we have to fail to reject the null hypothesis. All right, so we obviously, type 1 and type 2 errors, all the p-values that use, type 1 error is alpha, represented by alpha, type 2 by beta, or beta as you like. I had years of stats in USA, so they call it beta. And here I must tell you another joke. When I was in USA, we had these initiation programs. One of them was they grouped all the students who had entered, the international students who had entered the university. And we had series of programs organized, including in the Smoky Mountains, which was just mind-blowingly awesome. One of them, there were these Greek students also. And there were these facilitators who were fellow students in the university who were being paid to be the facilitators. And of course, there were professors who were the actual leaders. So I overheard this American student asking the Greek students, "What language do you speak in your country?" And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe you're asking a Greek what language they speak in Greece. Don't you know? Greek is one of the source languages for English, and it's used, Greek alphabet is used for statistics. Greek alphabet is on the sorority and fraternity houses on campus. Never mind all these hip hop, I mean, not hip hop, but all these hip looking boys going around with their lambda, beta, gamma t-shirts and sweatshirts. Never mind. So type 1 error is represented by alpha, type 2 error by beta, and you definitely have to, because of the history with medical research, it's better not to introduce a drug that could cause harm than fail to introduce a drug that is beneficial. So type 1 error is always the one that we are concerned about in quantitative research. And remember, if you're very convinced and you have found non-significant findings, increase the sample size, change the method, persist until you are able to find support for your claim as a researcher. Type 1 error can never be exceeded by 5%, and the graver the risk of false positive, the lower the more stringent the threshold for declaring significance or non-significance. So so I'll give you an example. So for example, the journals that are under the purview of the American Medical Association, they are all using 1% as their threshold. So below 1% is fine. If the type 1 error exceeds 1%, it is non-significant. So whereas typically for journals that are under the purview of the American Psychological Association, we use a 5% cutoff. So below 5% is significant results, above 5%, even if it's 0.051, it is considered to be non-significant. Some researchers say marginal trend up to 10%, but that is rare. So you have you have parametric and non, so probability, please note, in statistics, your type 1 error itself is a probability estimate, and there is no advanced statistics without a type 1 error. And when we claim to have significant findings, it does not mean that type 1 error is eliminated. It means that the likelihood is so low that we are believing that it is not occurred. But please remember that in engineering, etc., when type 1 errors have been kept ridiculously low and minuscule, still you have products that have failed and caused grievous harm and injury, because a type 1 error which is minimal does not mean in actuality that it is not going to be the case. We are operating in advanced statistics with low likelihood means not occurring. Okay, let me see central limit for parametric methods, which are based on sampling distributions, which we wish for sampling distributions to be normal, because once they are normal, then the tails, that is extreme values, are curtailed, to be using funny words, and most of the values lie in the center. So therefore the chances of obtaining a significant finding are higher, and we yearn for a normally distributed sampling distribution. But and there are conditions under which a sampling distribution, which is the probability distribution of an estimator, there are conditions under which it will be normal, but I cannot go there. And I can go there briefly. One of the conditions is the central limit theorem, and one is sample size. So when sample size is large, which is above 25 or above 30, the sampling distribution is normal. That is the central limit theorem. And the other is to do with, if the population values are normally distributed, the sampling distribution is normally distributed. Okay, non-parametric methods are distribution-free. Chi-square is a very popular non-parametric method, Spearman-Brown, and so on and so forth. Let's go ahead. So quantitative research can be used for scale or test construction, standardization. So to establish the validity of a test that has been constructed, criterion-related predictive validity, criterion-related concurrent validity, construct validity. So you have convergent and divergent validity. All of these require statistics. All right. Reliability. So, for internal consistency, the Cronbach's alpha obviously is a statistical method. You have the split half. Then even for inter-rater reliability, you need statistics. Norming. For testing manuals to be developed, you need norming. You need the percentile scores, which is all statistics. So you get the picture. We go ahead. Data reduction, identification of dimensions. So you may have 500 items or 100 items and you throw them into a mathematical space and you rotate them in mathematical space. I did a lot of factor analysis when I was in USA, not much afterwards. But my own doctoral research required factor analysis and a primary rotation and a secondary rotation till the whole point, items that cling together in mathematical space are obviously positively correlated with each other, and items that are flung and don't cling to any cluster or factor are likely to be thrown out. Then you can identify dimensions using factor analysis, and there are multiple, there are primary rotation, secondary rotation, and each rotation has multiple formulae like Varimax rotation. You have cluster analysis and so on and so forth. There's a lot, there's humongous humongous stats only to do with data reduction and identification of dimensions. Comparisons, comparing and contrasting phenomena, loads and loads and loads of stats to do with that. So you may be comparing groups, male, female, boards of education, groups that differ based on based on ethnicity or whatever. Or you have time measurements. So you're contrasting time 1, time 2, time 3. You have repeated measures. So you have t-test, you have the 1 sample t-test, you have the 2 sample t-test of independent groups, you have the z-test of independent groups, which is quite a useful one. You have tests of differences in proportions. You have chi-square for qualitative data, a univariate chi-square, bivariate chi-square. You have one-way and two-way ANOVAs for independent groups. You have repeated measures ANOVA. You have, so anyway, I could go on. You have lots and lots of stats for comparing and contrasting phenomena. It is a very favorite activity. Anyways, human beings love to, ye bada hai, ye chota hai, ye madhyantar hai, ye aisa hai. अच्छा नहीं वो ज्यादा बोल रहा था. We love to compare and contrast anyhow, and quantitative research has n number of tools for comparing and contrasting phenomena. Favorite activity in general, favorite activity of quantitative researchers. And I just wanted to share the beauty of the F statistic and ANOVA. So you have here, ANOVA, I love the logic of the ANOVA. So if you're talking of, say, ANOVA is used when you have more than 2 groups. So suppose you are saying, that these 3 communities are different, or we can even take 5 communities. So these 5 communities are different in their parenting style, or we can say they're different in the age at marriage. Now, the wonderful thing about ANOVA is that, hey, dear, you are talking about between group differences, but do you know that within the group also there's heterogeneity? So ANOVA is this fantastic statistical method where you have a ratio. So if you wish to claim that the groups are different on your target phenomenon, then you had better prove it that the between group difference outweighs the within group difference. So you have on the numerator of the F statistic, you have the mean squares for BG, between groups variability, and denominator is within group mean squares. So I think it's a very wise point. You want to say these groups are different? They better be more, that difference between groups should be way larger than the differences that exist within the groups. All right, so very good, funky thinking. Let's have a look here for relationships between phenomena, another favorite activity of quantitative researchers. So you have bivariate relationships. You may use Pearson, Spearman, chi-square, depending on whether you have quantitative variables that are linearly related, quantitative variable, that is Pearson, two quantitative variables that are non-linearly related, Spearman-Brown, two qualitative variables, either on the nominal or ordinal scale, chi-square. You have that bivariate chi-square. You have simple regression where you have put a least squares line in the bivariate scatter plot. You have partial coefficients where you have increased the number of coefficients, number of variables to more than 2, and you have multiple regression where you have, and I've not even put things like multivariate regression. Anyway, multiple regression where you have multiple predictors for the outcome variable. You have log linear analysis, which is the relationship between more than 2 categories. So this is, and I wanted to just again illustrate quantitative research by taking one specific example of Carl Pearson's product moment correlation coefficient. So I have here a simple exercise. I like to do these exercises in class. You are kind of doing 2 things in one go. You are teaching the stats, and you're, also telling academic performance is co-varying at least with number of hours of study. So here you have xi, number of hours of study, yi is the academic performance in percentages. And so you have the x bar, which is 2 hours per day outside of college time. You have the y bar, which is 75%, quite an, this is a rosy picture. If you're a teacher, you understand what I'm saying. And then you have the deviations for the variable x from, so xi minus x bar, you have the deviations for the variable y from its mean, y bar. You have the sum of squares for the variable x, and you have the sum of squares for variable y. Very importantly, a very wonderful, again, funky statistical method here, which is thanks to Carl Pearson, who apparently was helped by Galton and others in the past, before him. Here's why it is called product moment, because you're taking the product of the deviations. Because you're taking a product, you don't need to square it before taking the product. So notice here that if the covariance or the pattern of covariation is in the same direction, here we have that happening. So greater the number of hours of study, we expect higher the academic performance. Then if someone is low, let's take this 4. If someone is high, we expect on X, we expect that person to be high on Y. And the product of the 2 will be also positive. But if someone is low, we expect that person to be lower in the academic performance. So you have the product of 2 negative deviations becoming positive. So covariance is another funky technique in stats, much to be appreciated. But again, I want to also bring to your attention majority picture. So if here we have all the pairs are conforming to the same pattern of covariation. So here it is low, 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 this first case, low number of studying hours and lower score on academic performance. Very high number of hours of study comparatively, and very high score on academic performance. Low, low, high, high, average, average, meaning with regard to that variable, because here you have so on and so forth. Therefore you have an R, the RXY, which is the definitional formula of RXY is covariance XY divided by the product of the 2 standard deviations. Here it is 0.891. This is a very high magnitude. But I want to share that it is not always the case that the pairs are co-varying in the same direction. And when will you get covariance that is not high? Either there's a nonlinear relationship, and therefore the positive product deviations are canceling the negative ones, or if there is no sustained pattern. So you have high, low, 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 high, low. Because if it is a negative relationship, please note that the pattern of covariation will be such that if X is high, Y is expected to be low. That is for a negative relationship. Okay, let us, for example, time spent surfing the net, time spent gaming, video gaming, online gaming, time spent online gaming, and academic performance. We expect a negative relationship. So please note the majority picture is captured for the correlation coefficient. So all pairs or almost all pairs have to co-vary in the same direction for the correlation coefficient to be significant. Otherwise, it will be non-significant. Anyway, here there's an optimal scenario. There were 6 cases, so degrees of freedom n-2 for correlation coefficient. It was one tail because I had a directional hypothesis that higher the number of hours of study, average number of hours of study per day, higher the academic performance. So it's one tail. And the obtained R value is higher than the critical R value, one tail, degrees of freedom 4 at P equals 0.01, which is got from this table. In particular, that was 0.891 greater than 0.882. The test result was significant at P less than 0.01. Because at 0.01, it was 0.882. 0.891 was the observed value, so you have less than 0.01. The null hypothesis is rejected at a type 1 error rate of less than 1%. Okay, so I'm going to model testing, and model testing for patterning interrelationships between multiple variables. Some of the models that are being very, very frequently used in research in the West, and here I hope, is mediation models. So you have mediation models. I think I've been showing this. I will stop share for a minute. Let me just say. So mediation models, what is a mediation model? You need at least 3 variables for a mediation model. So you have, suppose I take child outcome, child adjustment as an outcome, and I have 2 predictor variables. I have parenting and I have marital conflict. Both have to do with parents. Okay, so now a mediation model means that there are the pattern of relationships between these 3 variables will be such, and there are these possible scenarios. So there's a scenario that you have direct effects model. So what is a direct effects model? That means that parenting has explains the variance in child adjustment, and you have marital conflict also explaining variance in child adjustment. Versus you have a fully mediated model. What is a fully mediated model? You have now marital conflict only as an indirect influence. Marital conflict explains the variance in parenting. Parenting has a direct effect. This is a statistical direct effect, not a causal direct effect. And parenting explains the variance in child adjustment. Or you have a partially mediated model. What is a partially mediated model? You have, again, you start out with marital conflict because that has to do with the dyad, which is not the parent-child dyad, whereas the parenting has to do with the parent-child dyad. So you start out with marital conflict. Marital conflict has 2 roots of influence. One through the quality of parenting, and one direct, because in homes, we have space constraints. Parents may be hostilely fighting with each other in front of the child. The child learns, aggressive conflict resolution from watching parents, Bandura, and observational learning and modeling, and so on and so forth. I will also show you, let me see. I will show you, okay, before I show you, I will tell you, yes, 10 minutes. Okay, so before I show you an example, I will share that in the literature, I guess you would understand that the partially mediated model is upheld with regard to marital conflict, parenting, and child outcomes because the marital dyad is visible to children and has a direct, can have a direct impact. Let's use Bandura's theory here of social cognitive learning, and you also have it mediated through the proximal intermediary of parenting, because if parents are hostilely fighting with each other, their quality of parenting is likely to be impacted. Here I'm going to share screen where I think there's a fully mediated model, and you can see here, this is the positive expressivity and the negative expressivity of emotions of the mother, and child's emotional regulation is the intermediary, which then explains, here you have a scenario where there's a child characteristic that is a mediator, and then you have the child outcomes of externalizing behaviors such as conduct disorder, internalizing behaviors such as withdrawal, and also social competence. So positive expressivity and negative expressivity, 2, child's emotional regulation, 2, 3, child outcomes. This is a mediation model, and mediation models are very popular. I will go back here. Very, very popular. Moderator model. By the way, I used a moderator model. It was barely coming into existence when I was doing my PhD, and I put my foot down and negotiated with my chair that I wish to use a moderator analysis. So what is a moderator model? A pathway between two variables is either weakened or exacerbated or worsened depending on the presence of a third variable. So I will share my doctoral research here. So I had access to a National Institute of Mental Health project, which I was coordinating at one of the 3 sites, which was at UTK. The other 2 sites were Vanderbilt University and Indiana University. So we had 2 cohorts of 200 families each, and we had 2 cohorts of 100 families each at 3 sites. So we had a 600 family site, and it was a longitudinal study. So what was my moderator model? Early adversity in the home setting, I said, would explain children's problem behaviors and children's competencies only if the child had adversity in the school setting. What was that adversity? Rejection, okay, peer rejection. So if there was peer rejection, then the pathway between early family adversity and later child competence and child problem behaviors would be upheld. All my hypotheses, which there were several of them, were supported in the research. Conditional effects model, I will show you here. I have it lined up to show you. So this is from Scott. I'm not yet, 1 second, share. Okay, so here you have, this is Affronti et al. From USA. This is the model. So here actually they had a partially mediated model. So fearful temperament of the child causing, statistical direct effect to child anxiety. That is a direct route, and the indirect route was through peer victimization, which is bullying. However, nurturing parenting was, this is a conditional effects model, and nurturing parenting was hypothesized as impacting both of these routes, the direct pathways to child anxiety. However, what they found was that this pathway was non-significant. So there was only one conditional effect. That means that children who were fearful definitely were more likely to be bullied in school. But if their parents were nurturant, These bullied, fearful children who were bullied were not likely to develop child anxiety if their parents were nurturing. That means they were warm, responsive, and so on. So, in other words, in this conditional effects model, one of the roots to child anxiety was curtailed in the presence of nurturing parenting. This other pathway between fearful temperament and child anxiety was non-significant in their research. Stop share and go back here to my PowerPoint. I will just briefly explain the cross-lag panel analysis is again very funky, but I have not personally used it, but I have written about it in my publications because it's being used a whole lot in research in USA, Britain, and other places. Now, for years, we have been saying that there are reciprocal effects between parents and children. So I'm talking of parents and children from my background, but you can talk of reciprocal effects or bidirectional pathways in any field that you would like to consider. Say consumers and producers. You could talk of mutual influences. So in a cross-lag panel analysis, you have longitudinal data, and you have maths to test for effects from child to parent, which is known as child-driven effect, or from parent to child, which is known as parent-driven effect. And there are researches where cross-lagged panel analyses are very much supported. One of them is this. I will just share one quickly. Where is this? Rothenberg. It's very complex, but please note that currently stats has many let's see, many complexities, but they are all doable with good support and with the openness to learn. So this is Rothenberg et al. Study in multiple countries, and this is their model of the cross-lag, because you have mother's behavior going to child behavior, you have child behavior going to mother behavior, and they had age 8, age 9, age 10, age 12, age 13. And they found the existence of child-driven effects and of parent-driven effects completely. And this was a research done in 9 countries. So that is amazing. Research published in the Cambridge University. Okay, going back fast, where are we? Okay, so this is model testing where you're looking at interrelationships between multiple variables, mediation models, moderator models, conditional effects model, and cross-lag panel analysis, which looks at reciprocal effects. And in all path models, SEM, I've not given you the full form, that is structural equation modeling. You don't look at only 2 variables. As you saw in those diagrams, you have multiple variables being simultaneously examined. You're doing model testing. Okay, model testing includes risk analysis. And like I told you, this is not my area of expertise, but this is extensively used in marketing, health, climate change, terrorism. I was quite fascinated. I had thought of, I haven't got some examples here, but I will just share them orally rather than show you. So whether a particular product, what kind of obstacles there may be in launching that product, and to what extent that launch of the product will be successful. So you have marketing, risk analyses models, you have health. So there is, I came across an excellent research that was done with regard to one of the older coronaviruses, where in this, which is highly cited now, because it clearly shows that masks, wearing a mask, okay, drops airborne coronavirus transmission drastically. So that was through a risk analysis model with, there are lots of mathematical models for risk analysis. Climate change also is using risk analysis models. I found one whole issue on the Wiley risk analysis journal entire issue devoted to risk analysis for terrorism. So risk analysis in the social sciences and life sciences is a very important method of quantitative research. It's not a method that I'm using, but it exists. Now, I want to share about experimental studies, interventions. I'm coming to the close of quantitative research, but I will need 5-10 minutes. The qualitative will go faster. You have other sessions on qualitative as well. This is a research that has just been published, Weber et al. And this is research published in 2021. It is on, I chose to go to a marketing management journal because up until now, all my examples and the ones that are coming are in the field of, psychology, human development. So here is a marketing management one. It's a broad area of sustainable consumption, and it had to do with connecting consumers directly to coffee producers using an international community-supported agriculture model. And when we are talking of the CSA model, remember, this is the theory that is undergirding this research, the role of CSA. Okay, so 3 experiential marketing inventions or tools were there: affective, cognitive, and sensory. So the affective one was watching a promotional video about the product and company. The cognitive was attending an in-person presentation, and the sensory was participating in an audio-guided mindful product tasting. All right, so control group was the standard method used, which was reading a leaflet about the product and the community-supported agriculture project. And here is their objective. So they said that we examined 3 experiential marketing tools targeting affective, that is feel, cognitive, think, and sensory experiences with regard to the potential for connecting consumers with producers and outperforming traditional marketing tools, that is the leaflet. They had 5 hypotheses, of which I have 3 here. We can have a look. They had the 3 experiential marketing tools, that is the affective one, the cognitive one, and the sensory one, will increase the level of perceived relational proximity between coffee consumers and coffee producers. And the coffee producers were in South America, and the coffee consumers in this study were in Germany and Switzerland. So they were geographically distant, but here you're talking of relationship proximity. And another hypothesis was the three experiential marketing interventions have a greater positive effect on consumers' evaluation of the coffee. And the third was on consumers' attitude regarding sustainable consumption. Just to let you know, some of their hypotheses were supported, some were not. So for example, this research was conducted in a sustainability fair. So the sustainability hypothesis was non-significant because everyone had a high score for, everyone had a positive attitude towards sustainability. That's why they were in that fair. Okay, let's go ahead. This is one last study that I want to bring up, and this is an example of a new opportunity in quantitative research. I'm just about finishing. Okay, so new opportunities in quantitative research are neurophysiological indicators of the efficacy of interventions. This is a Fu et al. 2020 study. It is an AB single subject design. I also chose this because, everyone thinks quantitative research, loads of cases and, huge sample size, but single case designs are very much existing in quantitative research. In fact, I had done a whole course on single case, single subject designs, quantitative ones, when I was studying in USA. This is the AB single subject design. The aim was to assess the effect that sand play therapy, which is a multi-sensory treatment modality, had on clinical symptoms and brain metabolite changes. So this is the acetyl aspartate to creatine ratio in the left and right thalami, or some people say thalamuses, whatever, of a 23-year-old patient with general anxiety disorder. So the A means a baseline period, which was a 45-day waiting period, and there was no improvement in anxiety in the waiting period. Then the B was the 18 one-hour sand play therapy sessions conducted by a qualified sand play therapist. And please note, there was improvement in clinical symptoms of anxiety, which was discernible from reduced anxiety scores from the clinical range to normal range using 2 clinical instruments, which are mentioned here. And there was an improvement in the brain health related to this measured through the ratio of the NNA by creatine ratio. It increased from below healthy range to healthy range. And they used proton magnetic resonance spectroscopy. So I just want to share, these are the new opportunities in quantitative research. We don't have to get into arguments about, oh, you know, paper and pencil test, even if it's a clinical instrument, what difference does it make? It may have been, it is, perhaps anxiety has not really reduced, but here you have neurophysiological indicators showing change, and this is going to be the way of our quantitative research future. I think that's amazing. One of the conferences that I attended, you know, where the person presenting had also used neuroscience, and I had asked, you know, does your university and your research lab have this equipment? And that person started laughing. He said, you know, how many billions of dollars this all costs? But anyway, what he said was that researcher, that he had joined hands with the medical personnel at a hospital. And I think that is also something that you could be looking forward to as scholars, where you can collaborate in interdisciplinary teams and have psychophysiological or neurophysiological indicators. Lastly, new opportunities with regard to quantitative research. Lastly, I have kept something, you know, we must, there are new opportunities in dissemination of research findings and use of cartoons. Actually, because of my work with the British Journal of Guidance and Counseling, I visited the Routledge, Taylor and Francis headquarters in Oxford. I have come to know that they have sold it during the pandemic, because they have publishers have run heavy losses during the pandemic, and Taylor and Francis has sold their real estate instead of reducing staff. But anyway, at the time when I visited their headquarters in Oxford, in UK, I came across this magazine. So life sciences research and different types of fields of research, they had made a cartoon book, and the research was represented through cartoons. And they have a team of cartoonists that Taylor and Francis has, who convert selected papers into cartoon form. I could not find that. I do have one of those magazines, but it is lying in my residence elsewhere. So I have here, I located on the internet some what's it called, researcher who has used a 3-panel cartoon to disseminate research to the general public. So here, let's have a look here. This is one of the, this researcher, she has converted Pauline Janssen's research, which shows that if you are soothing a child by feeding the child, you know, I mean, the child, whenever the child wants to, the child grows up and will be obese. So here's the cartoon. This is the problem, the finding, and the practical solution. This is what will be in the discussion section of the research report. So here is a 3-panel representation of research findings, which is for the dissemination of research to the general public. I will show one other one here. And this is coronavirus relevant. So you have a problem, the 1918, then the 2019. And this is the review of literature in the first panel, the review of literature. The main finding that it's not just the respiratory tract, but it's the nervous system, the liver, the intestinal tract, the brain, the heart, never mind the olfactory functions, that is, of course, through the brain. And then this is the recommendation implication. When you research flu in patients or in the lab, try to look in other directions beside the respiratory tract. So this is also a 3-panel representation. So, remember, this is the last slide for quantitative research, and I invited you to journey with me as not just an adult who wants the status and wants the competence of a researcher, but also as a child. And the quantitative part, I'm ending with this again, the playful child in you, so cartoons as a way of disseminating research to the general public. Okay, thank you so much. And we have a little segment of qualitative methodology remaining, but in the meanwhile, we are going to break.
Yes, this is not a break for you to go away, but a break in a way to ask a couple of questions that have come up and to clarify a few things, maybe just a kind of a segue from the quantitative into the qualitative. All right, so I've got a few questions which I'm going to pose here. I think the break can be just about 5 or 7 minutes, and then we can move into the qualitative as well. Okay, so to begin with, one of the things that came up was in terms of significance of results. We've got the whole alpha and those kind of concepts, but sometimes results may not be significant and yet they might be relevant. So is there some kind of an example that you can give to help illustrate this point?
Sure. So that is the reason. So we have significance and we have non-significance. If it was only significant findings that we were chasing after, then we would say insignificant findings rather than non-significant. So if suppose, I'll take that Weber et al. 2021 example of coffee consumers and coffee producers. So they had thought that sustainability would be enhanced, attitude towards sustainability would become more positive through the 3 experiential interventions and not as much through the standard intervention of a leaflet. But that is not what they found. They found that there were non-significant findings across the ABCD, that is the affective, cognitive, sensory, experiential intervention, as well as the leaflet, because all had a favorable attitude towards sustainability. Why? Because it was a sustainability fair, a sustainability bazaar, where people who already had a favorable attitude to sustainability had come. So this is a non-significant finding, but it's very relevant. So you want to increase favorability of attitude towards sustainability, you need to find a context other than a bazaar for sustainability. You can't have a banner sustainability fair and then you are expecting that through your experiential intervention, you're going to increase the sustainability. Those people who have made time to come there already have high levels of favorable attitude towards sustainability. So you need to target perhaps the railway station where you have a greater diversity of people who don't care two hoots about sustainability. Oh, so what? I want my coffee now. It doesn't matter what is the payment being given to those coffee plantation workers in Brazil. Who cares? I want cheap coffee and right now. Oh, I'm going to throw this styrofoam cup wherever I want. I'm sorry. I'm not advocating any of this. So I'll give you yet another example. So if you are claiming that there's a gender difference, suppose you're claiming, and there is no gender difference, that is a relevant finding. Or if you have an intervention that is non-significant, then that is relevant. It is not, the only problem is that where does the problem lie? Non-significant findings are always relevant. We need to know that something is not significantly different. We need to know that there was no significant impact of a particular intervention. We need to know that these two variables are not related to each other. Now, what is the hitch then? The hitch is that for publication, how will you get that research out into the academic community? Through oral presentations, but that is not good enough, but through the published written word. So that published written word, generally, the papers that have very many non-significant findings or 100% non-significant findings are unlikely to be published. So that is where the hitch is. Non-significant now the other hitch is your non-significant findings should not be the result of poor methodology. So long as you have used the best methods and you have got non-significant results, it's very relevant. But if you have used shoddy, convenient shortcuts and got non-significant findings, it's not relevant. So if we take the criterion of excellence, then non-significant findings are relevant, but the only hitch is that the likelihood of getting publication space in a journal is low. What is that's the threat. What is the opportunity? The opportunity we have today is the blogging, is the media, you can go on social media and create a buzz about it, even if it is non-significant. So that is the opportunity. Threat also I've explained.
Thank you. One more question I think we'll take from here, and I'm sure this is from a teacher itself. Given that there are advanced softwares for data analysis, is it still important for students to understand those essential concepts of the statistical tool and the ability to calculate those values manually? Because students, we feel, are becoming too dependent on software. Does that also influence the quality of the research output?
So I must tell you that I teach SPSS, Statistical Package for the Social Sciences. And when I did that, I told you I did my 4 semesters of stats, and I did a 5th semester within the department because it was one of my chairs of the committee who was teaching that course. Anyway, so I had 5 semesters of stats, direct stats in USA, and 2 semesters in Baroda. Now, and I'm not counting dissertation hours and thesis hours, those are separate. Now, when I did that course, I did with the life sciences, I did SAS, that is Statistical Analysis Systems, and one of my chairs, he had done SPSS. So I gave him SAS output and he said, no, I don't want SAS output. So within half an hour, I could give him SPSS output, because if you know one, you can transfer to the other. Anyway, coming to what I want to explain. So from then, I have been teaching SPSS because like I told you, my professor, one of my professors, Cheryl Bueller, all her other students, go to Anu. Okay, now, SPSS I've been teaching. What do I tell my students when I'm teaching SPSS? It's the over-friendly land. So it says, yes, whether you want to jump in the well, if you want to stand at a well and you want to say, I want to jump in the well, it will say, okay, I will do it for you. So now, I'm also a stats teacher. It is incredibly important for students to manually do at least basic stats and the most frequently used advanced statistics like, correlation and t-test and z-test and chi-square and ANOVA, you have to, because SPSS is a machine. Any software is a machine. It does not see. So just now, I can show you right now. We don't have time unless Ruby gives me. I can ask the SPSS, which is on my laptop, to compute the mean religion of the community, and it will give it to me because it is a machine. It does not think. SPSS, SAS, any software is only an effective tool in the hands of those who know what they are doing, who can of course there's a coaching, there's a aspect in every dialog box of SPSS. They have tutorial, but please note, nobody looks at those, hardly ever. SPSS will create means out of qualitative data. It doesn't care because you have you have coded your qualitative data in numbers. 1 equals Hindu, 2 equals this, 3 equals that, or 1 equals divorced, 2 equals separated, whatever it is. It is going to do whatever. If I wanted to, you cannot use, for 2 qualitative variables, you cannot use Pearson's correlation coefficient. But if I ask SPSS, it will do it. What does it care? It's a programmed software. It is a machine. So it is critically important for students to be able to learn the basic maths that is the foundation of descriptive statistics and the basic maths of frequently used advanced procedures. Yes, I understand that cross-lag panel analysis, you're not going to sit and do it manually, but I think I deliberately put that correlation coefficient over there because I'll tell you another thing. Once I had a student who it was in the second year after I had finished teaching in the first 2 semesters of the master's program, and her guide sent her to me because she said that her findings don't make sense. So I said, okay, show me your data. Okay, show me your calculations, because at that time she was doing it manually. So you know what she had done for correlation coefficient? Because she hadn't understood it, she had put all values of X in ascending order. She had put all values of Y in ascending order, and then she had computed the covariance. But why did this happen? Because the student did not comprehend what is covariance. So it is, this kind of dialogue is there in other fields where they say, why does a designer need to know how to stitch a garment? But unless you have some basic knowledge of draping and cutting a garment, you cannot design garments that are complete novelties, and neither will you have empathy for those who are executing. Of course, we don't need empathy for SPSS or SAS, but you get my point. So it is, I am very, very clear. You definitely need to have hands-on, minds-on. We cannot be in a click mode, which is what SPSS or any software is.
Thank you so much for validating that.
I would show it, demonstrate it, but because of time, I will resist showing you.
I think I'd like to also point out that one of our speakers yesterday, Dr. Bimal Roy, had also mentioned this, that the machine can crunch out all kinds of data, but it won't make sense unless you know what you're looking for and what you are asking.
That reminds me, for those of you who were listening to Dr. Roy yesterday, I want to share one thing. So he talked about apples and divorces. Okay, I want to tell you that, so that is what is in quantitative research called a spurious relationship. And I must tell you this example. And so a researcher in the West found a relationship between number of homicides and number of religious meetings. And it was a spurious relationship because both the variables were actually, the variance was explained by a third variable, which was nothing but city size. As the size of the city increased, the number of religious meetings increased, as did the number of homicides, as did the And that is the reason why it was, even in yesterday's example, every year the divorces may increase. Every year the export of apples would have increased in UK. That is why that Fisher, Dr. Fisher found that as a very important example. So, but yes, you have to have an understanding of your data, and the more you have a hands-on experience and a minds-on experience, the better, because click, click, click is not going to engage. I mean, it's not the path to excellence. Let me be brief.
Thank you. Yes. There was one more question about checking the quality of qualitative research, but I think we can get to that after you put your qualitative forth. Thank you. So we'll continue now. Yes.
Yeah, I need to now plug in.
Time is now, yes,
yeah. So
5:15.
I will just take half a second, not half a second, that's an exaggeration. I will take under a minute to plug in my laptop. 1 second. When you get up, please be careful. Okay, I am back. Yes. All right, so we go on to qualitative research, and I've kept this brief. We will finish in time. Okay, all right. So all right. So qualitative research, I will say, is a counterposition. It's a counterposition to the majority position. Now, when quantitative research is, the word majority can be used for quantitative research in two ways. First of all, it is the mainstream research methods. And I must tell you that my research methods training was entirely in quantitative methods. I'm a self-taught qualitative researcher, but I have chosen to teach myself qualitative methods. But my doctoral work, all those 5 semesters of research methods in 6 semesters, I had that single case research design also from the College of from the at the Austin P building. That was the College of Psychology. Okay, so I have had extensive training in quantitative methods, but I have been drawn to qualitative research for reasons that I hope will also inspire you. Okay. So, yeah, 1 second. So majority is a majority position. 2 ways of looking at it for quantitative research. Number 1, it is the mainstream research culture has been quantitative. Secondly, all of quantitative research is statistically, the statistical methods involve framing the majority position that emerges from the data. Okay, so here there are some ideas that are going to be repeated, and I must say that I have a publication from my publication, which I have happily self-plagiarized. But this is not going to be published, so it's fine. Okay, so the quantitative paradigm is the stronghold. It's the domineering position in research, and the qualitative research paradigm has been the minority position in research. And in fact, in the United States, Denson, a very important qualitative researcher, and Denson and Lincoln's book is most renowned, have noted that there has been in USA an attempt to force qualitative methods into remaining marginalized because of the heavy focus on evidence-based data with RCTs, randomized controlled trials, and so on, which have domineering, so hegemony of RCTs, for example, randomized controlled trials. But there is a discernibly growing movement towards qualitative research, and sections devoted to qualitative research methods have been expanding in newer textbooks, and journals that originally published only hardcore quantitative research are actively seeking and publishing qualitative research. And in multiple fields, this shift has happened. Now, you remember this is something that we've already viewed at the beginning of the quantitative presentation, and the ideological stance, the position of the researcher, extent of pre-structuring, aim, data collected, how the data is collected, how the data is analyzed, conclusions are drawn using what, dissemination. So we are going to, let's have a look. So the ideological stance of the qualitative researcher. What does it go hand in hand with? There's a high likelihood of post-positivist, post-modernist, and constructionist views. I just want to share that it is not necessary that all qualitative researchers are identical. The positivist paradigm is one of the paradigms in qualitative research. So if you pick up a list of paradigms in qualitative research, one of them is positivist, but that's why I've written a high likelihood. There's a very high likelihood that a qualitative researcher has a worldview that is post-positivist, post-modernist, or constructionist. So what is in the belief system of a typical qualitative researcher? So truth is subjective. Now, I just want to stop the PowerPoint and talk for a minute. So when we talk of subjective and objective, it is not to do with biased and unbiased in a positive and negative, I mean, in a flawed way. So the word subjective in the English language and for scientists also has been tainted with something that is flawed, which is not neutral, not objective, as in so you associate objectivity with neutrality, and you associate subjectivity with a flawed perspective. But this is not the case actually, because there are many scholars of high repute who use the word subjective as that which comes from the subject, and object that which comes from the object. A very important proponent in philosophy, and which is also included in the philosophy of science, but he was a philosopher, that is Richard Rorty, American philosopher. In his book, anyway, in one of his books, he wrote prolifically, he says, the world does not speak, only we do. So if we are describing, if we are researchers who are studying, say, bullying, okay, the object does not speak. So if we are, even if suppose we are talking about knowledge about an apple, the apple is not going to speak. It is the subject, the scientist, who is going to speak. I repeat, subjective is that which comes from the subject. Objective is that which comes from the object. Key scholars who have, rattled the fields in which they belong, such as Jean Piaget in the field of developmental psychology, known as developmental science now, he talked of object as coming from the object and subject as coming from the subject. And he, of course, wrote in French, so he talked of sujet and objet. The T not being, the C being minus, the T not being pronounced. Now, the thing is that in typically a qualitative researcher explicitly acknowledges that there is no possibility of being without a position. So even if we look at a physical interpretation of that, you are always located somewhere in physical space. You are located in a space which is to do with a time and age. Time is, like today is the 16th of March, 2021, pandemic time. All right. We are not yet over with the pandemic. It's also the researcher's age and where in the life experience is the researcher. So you have physical location, you have a temporal location, you have a location based on culture. Obviously, now based on your culture is indivisibly related to who you are, then your gender identity, your class identity. So many things are informing your worldview without your being explicitly aware of it. Moreover, you as a person who is formally educated, you have been initiated into your field, you have been indoctrinated, if we use a stronger word, you have been indoctrinated into the key concepts of your field. You have been told by your teachers and textbooks and papers what is wrong, what is right, what is incorrect, correct, etc. So a qualitative researcher understands that there is it's always a point of viewing. You always have a location from which you're viewing. So you can never be without a position. To be without a position is out, it's just impossible. So, and the other things which come from physics and other, objects actually don't have absolute properties. So objects, now this is in some of Deepak Chopra's writing, no doubt, but he is a very influential contributor. So by the way, the chair, the weight of a chair on Earth is not the same as the weight of the same chair, say, in Mars or on the moon. So the chair doesn't have an absolute property. It is determined by its location and the gravitational field in which it belongs. So it is in the system in which it is located. Likewise, all right, many of the properties that we attribute to objects are actually based on our sensory apparatus. So if the snake's world is different from our world, the snake has infrared vision, and our vision, or for example, we hear only medium level sounds. We don't hear high pitches, we don't hear low. So of course we have, as Paul Baltus has said, human development, we benefit from biocultural co-construction. So we have devices that can hear better than our ears. We have devices to grip better than animals, and so on and so forth. Anyway, coming to what I'm saying, not only is the subject the one who is the speaker. Remember, the research paper in quantitative research is written by the researchers. It's written by the authors. It is not written by the participants. And we will see how this changes in qualitative research. So the researcher is the speaker. Rorty said, the world is out there, but truth is not out there, because truth is couched in language, and language is a human construction. And therefore, truth is dependent on the human mind and human language. And if we move away from single sentences like, okay, who won the cricket match yesterday? All right, whether England won it or, India won it, or then there is a single truth. But if we move away from single sentences and we look at vocabularies, comprehensive vocabularies, then there is no single truth. So the other thing is, and here I will take Piaget, go back to Jean Piaget. Jean Piaget says truth lies neither in the subject, that is the scientist or the child or the speaker, neither in the object, but is in the it emerges from the actions of the subject on the object. So he says, in fact, so a huge, most of human knowledge, by the way, is not in the object. Show me a zero walking around, other than in a preschool where a teacher is wearing a body puppet of a zero, or not in a preschool, probably school. Zero is not necessary. But where is the zero? Where there's not even a perfect circle in the universe. There is no perfect circle in the universe. It is it's that, our math circle where the diameter is the same regardless where, okay, that's nothing. There's no circle, perfect circle in the universe. There's no, where is the 2? Where is the 1? Where is the, all of maths is invention, human invention based on human actions on objects, which include physical objects and social objects. So Piaget, the reason I'm bringing up is Piaget clearly was a constructionist, and qualitative research uses constructionism. Okay, let me go back to the share screen. Okay, so subjectivity of truth is not to mean that it is truth which is flawed. There is a position from which a truth becomes a truth. And that position may be because of a community worldview. So, I remember, when I was teaching FYs 1 year, and I was talking about contrasting a hunter community with current urban community, and identity crises are very much a emergent feature of urban communities, where the number of choices that adolescents have are so numerous that there is a crisis. So I said, in a hunter community, things were so fixed. You are a boy, you're going to grow up to be a hunter. You are a woman, you're going to be, tanning the hide, and etc., etc. So, I said, what do hunters do? And one student in the class, this was over 100 students in the class, and she said, they kill. So I said, oh, are you from the Jain community? She said, yes. So okay. So, when I use the word hunter, all that she could think of from her worldview was kill, and killing as a sin. So, when we are talking of subjectivity, we recognize that any truth that we are holding is always from a point of viewing. That point of viewing is impacted by one's culture, community, gender, class, the professional indoctrination, or which is known as formal education, okay, and so on. It is never neutral. And the moment you understand that there are subjectivity in truth, you immediately have to understand that truth is not absolute, truth is not singular, truth is plural. You also simultaneously reject value neutrality. So you recognize that, yes, and by the way, anyone rejecting values, that itself is not a neutral position. And there's been so much talk on racism, and especially with Meghan, the celebrity, in the sense she's a celebrity, Meghan and Prince Harry's interview, and all those hoo-ha that has been created about I'm not racist. But there has been an observation made in the media that it is white journalists who are unable to empathize with Meghan, and it is all mixed heritage, ethnic minorities, African origin, who are able to possibly view what she went through, because if you are, that's your worldview. You cannot, when you have had no experience of being an outsider and you have led a privileged existence, and especially with that fellow who walked off the show, he's a man, Piers Morgan, and you're obviously you have a worldview which is different, so that worldview can limit your being able to comprehend somebody else's position. So there's a plurality of positions, rejection of value neutrality. There is a lower preoccupation or outright rejection of the majority picture. Therefore, coming to that, idiographic methods are more common. It is idiographic, unless you are a positivist qualitative researcher, and they happen to be in the minority, but they do exist. There's a high possibility of inductive reasoning. So you go from the specific to the general, and your orientation is interpretive and narrative. Yes, of course, qualitative researchers also have a discipline-specific worldview, and they have culture and personal worldviews that also exist. Let's continue. Now, what is the role or position of the qualitative researcher, role, position of the participants? So here, again, putting aside positivist qualitative research paradigm, which is only one of numerous qualitative paradigms, none of the others, all the others are post-positivist. The researcher steps down from the pedestal of being an expert, and the participant is considered a co-investigator. You have action research projects, action research as a method where you have the participants designing the research study itself. So the research questions, if there is an intervention being planned, it is being planned by the participants. They are not in the role of a passive recipient. And the researcher continues to monitor and regulate their role and check that they are not slipping into the expert role, because obviously the researcher is going to be formally educated and most of the times is a heavyweight academic. So in qualitative research, and I have examples to show you later, in qualitative research, the researcher who in their chosen field is an expert, in the qualitative research monitors and self-regulates to see that the researchers not slipping into this hierarchy of expert and recipient. And many research, there are participatory research methods in qualitative where you become a participant yourself as a researcher. You reside with the community that you want to study. Then here I've already shared the participant as a co-investigator. So let's continue. Extent of pre-structuring in most qualitative research is low to very low, and occasionally it is moderately low. Let us look at, okay, let me talk first and then I'll do the recap. You, by the way, in qualitative research, you do not want to arrive at your research problem with preconceived notions. So grounded theory is a very important aspect of qualitative research. That means that theory is emerging from the data rather than the data being guided by a pre-existing theory. So literature will be studied, no doubt, but theory has to emerge from the data, I repeat, rather than theory guiding what data to solicit. The aim is narrative, interpretive. The aim is to solicit the lived experience of the participants rather than to force participants coming to data collection instruments also. So the aim will be narrative, interpretive. Data collection instruments, oh my God, those boxes and those, those are, they find them aberrant. So data collection instruments are open-ended, semi-structured, either semi or most of the time unstructured. Probes, some interview guide may be there where there are 2-3 questions. All right, but no multiple response boxes and rating scales and, what you have it, checklists and so on. Analytical tools, purely qualitative research does not use any statistics. If it is mixed methods, yes, but purely qualitative research does not use statistics. It uses a variety of interpretive tools. Findings are, you can show the findings to your participants and have participants make changes. You also invite the reader to make the same conclusions that you have made by providing what is known as thick description or verbatim responses of the participants. You retain the voice of the participant. Okay, so you very much want to capture, retain the voice of the participant, and you play a role, but you do not become the sole speaker. So here you have grounded theory. I've told you. You have aim. Another thing to mention here, the objective format, and the objective format could be used, but hypotheses are not used because hypotheses are pre-structured. And open-ended questions are the best way of framing qualitative research. Data collection instruments, as I have already spoken, are open-ended, unstructured, far less structured. Okay, I've shared everything. Let's go ahead. There are two McLeods that I'll be citing. This one here is a man, John McLeod, and there's some lady McLeod, or some female scholar also coming up. So qualitative research explores, John McLeod says, how is meaning constructed in, how meaning emerges from individual lives, from relationships between people, from social groups and cultures. Now, Denson and Lincoln have obviously said that there's ample plurality within qualitative methods, and qualitative methods are not free of some of the grays that exist in quantitative research. That would be, that would be discriminatory if qualitative research had no grays and only quantitative research had grays. Let me continue. Denson and Lincoln, despite noting that there are numerous research approaches in qualitative research, they have distinguished qualitative research as follows. Okay, so this is a direct quotation of Denson and Lincoln. So the word qualitative implies an emphasis on the qualities of entities and on processes and meanings that are not experimentally examined or measured, if measured at all, in terms of quantity, amount, intensity, or frequency. On the other hand, as you know, in quantitative research, quantity, amount, intensity, frequency is the mainstay. Qualitative researchers stress or emphasize the socially constructed nature of reality. The emphasis is on the social construction of reality and the intimate relationship between the researcher and what is studied, rather than the two being mechanistically or in a reductionist way being separate. And the situational constraints or the situational limitations that shape inquiry. Let's have a look. Multiplicity and diversity is anticipated, and it is proactively sought throughout the research process. And a very important concept is triangulation. Yeah, we are doing well on time. I will finish. I've kept in mind, yes. So triangulation is a very key concept in qualitative methods. Let's, oh gosh, there's an N missing here, sorry. Denson, way back in 1978, has distinguished between 4 types of triangulation. The N is missing, please visualize it. So all types involve the employment of multiple means or modes. So there is data triangulation, which is when multiple sources of data are used. Okay. Then there is investigator triangulation, when you have a multidisciplinary research team. Then there are there's theory triangulation, if you use multiple orientations to interpret the phenomenon. And when you use multiple methods, you have methodological triangulation. So he has distinguished between data triangulation, investigator triangulation, theory triangulation, and methodological triangulation. And further, he says, use multiple types of triangulation in the same research. Okay, I'm going ahead. Gergen and Gergen, also very influential in writers in the qualitative research. They have said that reflexivity and multiple voicing are illustrative of innovations in methodology, which have which are the outcome of the qualitative methods movement. So what is reflexivity here? There's a theoretical explanation, but I have examples coming up. The researcher reflects about and makes visible to the reader or other audience how the conclusions that are being drawn are situated in a specific historical, geographical, and cultural context, as well as influenced by the researcher's own personal views and leanings. What is multi-voicing? Divergent perspectives are sought and presented, and there is no attempt made to make something more important, something less important. Then the research report could contain the participants' interpretations of the findings. The researcher could also present contradictory interpretations and refrain from making any superordinate conclusion where a choice would have to be made. And it also includes recognition that polyvocality is within an individual and not just across individuals. Then you have qualitative Denson. This is a very good way of capturing qualitative research. It is entails complex interpretive practices in naturalistic settings. Then very important, etic and emic, nomothetic, idiographic. So in place of an etic or nomothetic approach, all right, where you are in etic, you know, you're presuming that something is common across cultures, across time, to a certain extent, across different contexts. So in place of an etic or nomothetic approach, which relies on the use of large or larger sample sizes, qualitative researchers use an idiographic emic approach, drawing on the rich details of specific cases. All right, now I'm going to, just to let you know what is remaining, I'm going to share 2 examples. One is the research study. The other is also a methodological case study, which is about dissemination of qualitative research. And then I have a few concluding points so that you can ask questions. So here I have taken Stoll and McLeod. Both of these are women. Both of these authors are women, and their publication in 2020, and they have used IPA and IPA lengths. And IPA, before we go to IPA, let us see the P. The P is for phenomenology. And I've taken Britannica's definition. So you can see here that phenomenology is a philosophical movement which originated in the 20th century And the main objective of this philosophy is that the direct investigation and description of phenomena is done as consciously experienced without theories about causal explanation and as free as possible from unexamined preconceptions and presuppositions. So direct investigation, conscious experience, not being, not using unexamined preconceptions, presuppositions. Let us go to IPA itself. IPA is interpretive phenomenological analysis, and it allows access to lived experience. So IPA studies focus on the intensive exploration of the experiences of a small number of participants in order to be able to identify individual differences alongside general themes. So intensive is a word that is generally, bracketed for qualitative research, whereas extensive is a word that is generally associated with uh, quantitative research. Intensive, all right, and here the lived experience of small number of participants. So qualitative research is not gung-ho about large sample sizes. And individual differences alongside general themes, so idiographic. Let's continue. So in this, I've kept the language as stated by the authors so that you see the language that a qualitative researcher uses. So Marcia Stoll, and I think it's Christina McLeod, but I could be mistaken. Anyway, Stoll and McLeod, they state that in this study, they have explored the experiences of school staff tasked with providing pastoral care and support to pupils with mental health difficulties. What is pastoral? It is providing emotional support, social support, and religious or spiritual support. It is a term that I have not come across in India, but it is used a lot in UK and Europe. So when you extend emotional care, emotional care, social support, and spiritual and religious support, it is called pastoral care. And it actually, as teachers, when we are extending a hand and caring for our students in the vocabulary of UK and Europe, it will be considered pastoral care. So the aim in this study was to help identify the teachers, the school staff specific needs while carrying out this role, and in order to help them provide better mental health facilities to their pupils. So please note, pastoral care does not mean that they're counselors. So they used staff from 2 mixed sex secondary schools in Scotland, and they had a small sample size of 6. And interestingly, they do not say 6 in their participant description. And the paper has gone through my action editing basis from the British Journal of Guidance and Counseling. So there were 3 guidance teachers amongst the 6, 1 support for learning teacher, 1 community school worker, and 1 pupil support worker. Then 4 of the participants had voluntary sought varying levels of counseling training, and 2 participants had basic mental health training. Sampling, please note that the authors made presentations in the schools, and the participants have self-selected. So again, remember that in the qualitative research, the qualitative researcher goes out of their way to provide the participant with roles other than being a passive recipient. They used open-ended questions. The 2 main questions that they used was, what kind of problems do your pupils come to you with? and what do you do to help them? Participants were encouraged to talk at length and expand on their experiences of identifying, understanding, and helping their pupils with mental health problems with minimal prompting from us as researchers. So this is again the qualitative stance I hope is visible to you. Going ahead, there were 2 sets of face-to-face interviews, which each lasted for 42 minutes to up to 2 hours. And in the second round, 3 of the interviews were through emails because of time constraints of the participants. So here, let's have a look. Very important, interview transcripts were annotated. So notes were made alongside the interview transcripts with exploratory comments from which themes in the data were developed and grouped into superordinate themes. So they state and they cite Smith, this form of analysis underscores or highlights connections between themes in the text rather than finding examples that fit a pre-existing theoretical model. And this is all what they have said in the paper. Quotes from participants are provided so readers can assess the degree to which the analysis effectively privileges the perspective of the participant. So I hope you are connecting it with what I have shared in my framework, that the findings are not pre-structured and the reader has a role to make conclusions and to judge whether the authors have represented the voice of the participant in a manner that is honoring the participant. And here we have, this is also very important on the same theme. So this research, they have a section in the research paper which they have titled The Researchers. And what do they say there? They say this research is informed and underpinned by the personal values and professional beliefs of the principal investigator, that is Marcia Stahl, who had 5 years experience as a counselor, lecturer, and support worker in the further education sector. Before undertaking this study, yes. I'm just finishing. Before undertaking this study, the author had little prior knowledge. Throughout, I talked about reflexivity. Please see the example of reflexivity here. Stahl continually reflected upon and scrutinized her role in the shaping of the data collection and analysis process. So reflexivity in the researcher, this slide is an example of reflexivity in the researcher. I just want to show the findings. So theme 1 was the personal emotional impact of the work, which was a broad level theme. A sub-theme was taking it home, and the verbatim responses which invite the reader to make the same conclusion that yes, this is a sub-theme which is relevant. So here, participant 2, I would think about her and be so traumatized, I would go home and cry. Another one, it is difficult not to get hung up in what you're doing or taking it home. It would be good to have someone to offload to. Another theme was awareness of time pressures. I had told you that I was going to bring up time later in the qualitative section. There was a sub-theme on school-based challenges. Here's participant 4. Our school day is so condensed, it's frenetic. It doesn't allow anybody to really speak to a teacher or to go to a service. There's a failing of how we operate our school support because time is not available. Sub-theme, multiple roles. I hate when you're on the cusp of them opening up and then the bell rings and I have to say, I'm sorry, I have to go and teach. I hate saying that to them. I feel frustrated. It's very, very difficult to then walk away. One last thing before I wind up. Research papers, even of qualitative research, do end up in academic journals, which are esoteric style, but can be are frequently supplemented through the written reports are supplemented or augmented through arts-based media such as song, picture, sculpture, poetry, film, video. I have taken one which used theater, and this was a methodological case study which describes the dissemination of research findings using theater. So in the primary research, the focus was on how the individual characteristics, life experience, and values of the therapist influence the process and outcome of therapy. The theater play that was for dissemination, it was in Norway. So it was a single act production with 6 actors, running time of 90 minutes. Originally, it was scheduled for 22 performances and it was extended to include 31 additional performances. 8,770 individuals attended the play within a 13-month period. And for Norway, that's a large number. They are a very small population. Title of the play was Transference, but of course it was in Norwegian. And it emerged from the playwright noticed when he looked at the transcripts of the interviews that there was a deepening of the interaction between the interviewer and the participants over the course of each interview. Transference is a concept which comes from Freudian psychology, which refers to a therapeutic process in which the past and present are brought up and explored within the client and therapist relationship. But there were other meanings to transference that were used in this play. That is a transfer of knowledge from one generation to the next, the transfer of research into art. Here's what I'm focusing on. Transfer of research into art. And very specifically, the transfer of a piece of art to the audience in the form of a theatrical performance. The structure of the play was organized around the presentation of a set of internal metaphorical universes within which each character, there were 6 characters, each character engaged in critical introspection with the audience was as an imagined dialogue partner. Characters spoke directly to the audience. Then there were 6 fictional characters. In order to maintain anonymity and confidentiality, at least 3 therapists' interviews were merged into one character. And here are some examples. Adwar struggle, one of the fictional characters created using the actual interviews, centered on his new identity as a retired person. Who am I when I'm no longer the psychotherapist? He articulated his realization that he had partly lived through the lives of others in an observer role. There was Anne-Marie, who was another character who first was not convinced about psychotherapy, and then she she became convinced and she accepted that psychological knowledge can be of real help for people, allowing them to become more fully themselves, including herself. All right, to my last slide. So what is this qualitative? It's something I've concocted, okay? So knock, knock, you had quantitative, the very confident quantitative, but you need humility there because the legs you're standing on are not based on certainty, they're based on uncertainty. Then you have qualitative, which is a counterposition, which is narrative, interpretive, real life, lived experiences, naturalistic settings, depth, all right? So what is qualitative? Qualitative is you take the best of the 2 worlds and you come up with something that has the best of both worlds. And surely you need numbers. You need don't we want to know? We have to know in Maharashtra how many unfortunate deaths there are by malnutrition in childhood. We cannot dismiss the numbers. We need the numbers. I've given that example, but we also need depth. So we need to know the lived experience of a tribal family. So qualitative is the third emergent um, research paradigm. Of course, and I can refer people to Cresswell for, he has a list of types of mixed methods designs. So anyway, I urge you to be quantitative. There are wonderful advantages of quantitative research. There are wonderful advantages of qualitative research, and why not mix and get the best of both? Thank you. You're not audible.
Yes, thank you so much. I don't think we have time for too many questions. Maybe just the one about whether there is a way to look at the quality of qualitative research. Like for quantitative, it's easier to know the quality. Is there a mechanism for that?
You'll be surprised. You need to quantitative research, I mean, is the quality is not necessarily easily discernible, okay? Because unless one goes to the data, and data sharing is becoming more common and is being demanded by some of the best publishers in the world, but it is not guaranteed. In the British Journal of Guidance and Counseling also, we have just introduced data sharing. That means somebody can ask for your data, and under reasonable requests, you have to meet that request. But data sharing is becoming a trend. Without data sharing, quantitative research can be fabricated or falsified very easily. You know, even a simple thing like a one-tail, you can have a one-tail test which is non-significant. I mean, one-tail test which is significant, but if the two-tail test, the critical values are higher. So for a two-tail test for the same thing, you can get a non-significant finding. How does the peer reviewer know whether you started out with a two-tail or a one-tail test? So I disagree. And just yesterday, I was listening to this biomedical researcher whose paper apparently is the most cited in the whole wide world, someone called Ioannidis from, he's at Stanford, I believe now. And he has said that he claims that biomedical quantitative research is not as, it's not of high quality as it's purported to be. So I'm in disagreement that I'm not saying quantitative research could be of very high quality, but it's not guaranteed. You definitely, and without data sharing, there's totally no guarantee that what you're seeing is what the data said. And secondly, one tail, two tail, whether they are manipulated after the data. And, you know, Bonferroni brought up again and again that the number of tests you increase in using the same data, the chances of type 1 error go through the roof. So you have to, if you're running multiple tests, you need to keep increasing the stringency of type 1 error. So you can't use 0.05 anymore. But you can do data harvesting, no? The paper that is being published, sorry, no one should be doing these things that I'm mentioning. I'm just saying it does happen. So you may have run 20, 30 tests, but you found 5 to be significant. You've written a paper as if you've only done those 5 or maybe 10 of them. How does anyone know that you ran 30 tests or you ran 10 tests or you ran 5 tests? So there are a lot of grays. Ioannidis, please go and he has a free lecture that he gave in 2019, some major lecture, brilliant speaker. I thought of using some clippings of his, but you know, I had time constraints, which I have shown in that qualitative research as well. Okay, with qualitative research, what I have found when I'm publishing my qualitative research, I will share, I have been questioned on my sampling. Okay, so I, in one of my qualitative researches, which was way back when I was learning to be a qualitative researcher, I had, this was with a student who asked 100 people to write their definition of what is religiosity and what is spirituality. And we got wonderful results, but the peer reviewer said, why 100? What is why 100? Then I also, the other what I have noticed, both as an author as well as an editor, there you have to explain which interpretive lens you have used. How did you do your theme extraction? Theme extractions depend on the interpretive lens. So you need, you cannot publish qualitative research just like that. And qualitative research, it is easier to see the inaccuracy. One time, one of my master's students, I could see had fudged her data, because how was it possible for 20 people to have said essentially the same thing? It's out of the question. So in qualitative research, fudging is more visible. Now, I'm not saying that someone could be very creative, but really the thick description of the verbatim responses uh, of the participants, when you're retaining that voice in the findings, you are able to judge the quality of the work. Then triangulation, and there are many stringencies that are required in qualitative research. And when you have a qualitative research paper, you're publishing it, obviously the referees it will go to are themselves qualitative researchers. So they are like, oh, what about this? What about this? Please explain this. So it's not only, yeah, it's not so simple to.
Right.
Yes, and there are, I have not spoken of complex qualitative research paradigms, such as the critical paradigm, where through your research, you are trying to, you know, work and mitigate past social oppression. And you are, through your research, empowering and giving a voice to the voiceless. So those require incredible skill and training. You cannot just become a critical researcher, a critical qualitative researcher just from, oh, I want to do it now and I'm going to start doing it.
Right. Great. Thank you so much. We have posted the feedback link in the YouTube chat, and I'm going to now request our head of department from the BMS, Soni ma'am, to please go ahead and say a quick thank you.
Thank you, Ruby. In fact, it is my honor to thank Dr. Anuradha Bakshi. It's been absolutely a very engrossing session, and true to the theme of our FDP, exploring new methodologies and perspectives. I must say, ma'am, that being a professor of research myself, I'm absolutely amazed at the way you have encapsulated all the concepts of both qualitative and quantitative research in such a beautiful story. You have not only highlighted the positives, but also you have critically evaluated both the qualitative and the quantitative in the best possible manner. Some of the things that probably our faculty and the research students will take away is how you explain the basic concepts of the sampling, to the characteristics of interest, to the type 1 and type 2 error and the level of significance, to t-test, z-test, single ANOVA and two-way ANOVA, and you explained chi-square. And finally, when you came to the qualitative section, where you explained the importance of a researcher who steps down from the pedestal of an expert and becomes a participant, that was absolutely, it's a big takeaway for everybody, where you emphasize that it's not just the big numbers in quantitative, but it's the smaller numbers, the insights that can actually go hand in hand to solve problems of the common man. And finally, I think you should patent the word qualitative, but I think it's a beautiful thing that you brought out, and I really loved it. And I'm sure all our participants from across the country, we've seen the chats, they're absolutely amazed at the kind of insights that you have brought into this 3-hour session. You have, what people teach over a term, you have spoken to us. And deep and a very genuine thank you, Dr. Anuradha. And hope you can visit us on campus and take a session in person. Thank you, ma'am.
Post-pandemic. Thank you so much. Most
Thank you.
of you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure being a student in your class. Thank you so much. And may I remind our audience that there is more coming up over the week, including more on qualitative methods, different kinds of qualitative methods to look forward to. Thank you very much. And we end for today.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you so much for your generous words.
Thank you, Anuradha. Thank you. Thank you, Ruby. Thank you, students.
Ruby, thank you. You were awesome. And your time, giving me all the time tips really was helpful.
Thank you.